Welcome everybody to the J Heritage Center's virtual program tonight, Culinary Justice, Cultural Resilience, and the History of Food. I'm Kevin Perino. I'm the Executive Director of the J Heritage Center. And on behalf of myself and our board president, Suzanne Clary, I want to welcome you tonight to this program that we've been eagerly awaiting, and we have a huge amount of enthusiasm for. We had over 300 people sign up for this event, which makes it our most popular event of the Zoom era. And so we're really excited about this. Our guests are Michael Twitty and Lavada Nahon, and it's moderated tonight by Lori Fontanes. For those of you, there are some people who know us and some people who don't. I did want to just mention that the J Heritage Center, if you haven't been, it's a beautiful 23-acre park and historic site on the shore of Long Island Sound in Rye, New York. We hope you come visit. It was the home of the founding father and diplomat, peacemaker, jurist, anti-slavery advocate, John Jay. It's also one of 14 sites on the Westchester County African American Heritage Trail. And we're really committed at the place to telling the stories of all the residents of the estate, enslaved and freed, who have lived there over the years. And we do now programs in history, social justice, and environmental stewardship. And this was right up our alley because it's a little of everything. So we're thrilled to have you all here tonight. I want to thank also our co-sponsor for tonight, Gloria and Francine at the American Women of African Heritage for co-sponsoring the event. And also we saw that there are a lot of our colleagues from different various parks and historic sites who are here tonight too, and I wanted to welcome them as well. I wanted to tell you quickly about a couple of other events that you might be interested that we have coming up at JHC, virtual events still for a little while, but I hope we'll be back to our normal programming soon. On February 9th, we have the diplomat Samantha Power coming, who's President-elect Biden's new nominee to head USAID. On February 11th, we have Gretchen Soren, the author of Driving While Black, African-American Travel and the Road to Civil Rights. On February 23rd, we have Tom Ricks, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian. He wrote a book called First Principles about how the Greeks and the Romans shaped the thinking of the founding fathers. And on February 27th, we'll be hosting the Westchester County African American Advisory Board Trailblazers Award. So it's a really busy month ahead, but an exciting month. I think we have a lot of fascinating stuff going on. Wanted to introduce our moderator, and then I'll throw it to you, Lori. Lori Fontanes is a writer, an advocate, backyard farmer. She has grown 40 different types of fruits and vegetables on land that was once lawn. She's a professor at Manhattanville College. She's written for all kinds of publications, and she's our newest trustee at the J Heritage Center. So we're thrilled to have her here. I'm excited for this, and Lori, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you also to Suzanne Clary, the president of J Heritage Center, for inviting me to do this, to just sit in. It's an honor to sit in on this conversation between two such wise people. Look at now, Lavada, who I think are going to have an amazing conversation. I'm going to try to not insert myself all that much. I'm here as a fly on the wall too, with all of y'all. But they are talented experts in this intersection between history and justice and food in a way that I am also a student. So thank you for that. And I just want to now introduce them a little more properly. Let's start with Lavada. Lavada Nahon is a noted culinary historian and interpreter of African American history, focused on the 17th and 19th century New Netherland, New York, and Northern New Jersey region. Lavada has 18 plus years of public history experience working with historic sites, museums, societies, and educational institutions. She's cooked on a variety of the region's historic hearths and has developed educational and teacher development and after-school programs, lectures, tours, historic presentations, and period dinners for sites such as New York Historical Society and the Fraunces Tavern Museum in Manhattan. I think I said that right. Johnson Hall, not a native New Yorker. Johnson Hall State Historic Site, and here in Westchester, Phillipsburg Manor, where I believe I have actually met her before, and Van Cortlandt Manor for the historic Hudson Valley. Currently, then this is amazing. This is the first time they've had this position. Lavada is serving as the first interpreter of African-American history for New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, which is amazing. Everyone, if we were in a room, you could clap for this part, but please welcome Lavada Nahon to our presentation here. Now, turning to Michael W. Twitty, is an award-winning culinary historian and food writer from the Washington, D.C. area. Michael has appeared on Bizarre Foods America, I want to see that show, with Andrew Zimmern, Many Rivers to Cross with Henry Louis Gates, and most recently, Taste the Nation with top chefs Padma Lakshmi. Michael's book, The Cooking Gene, which many of you probably have read, A Journey Through African-American Culinary History in the Old South, traces his ancestry through food from Africa to America and from slavery to freedom. The HarperCollins book was a finalist for the Kirkus Prize and the Art of Eating Prize, and in 2018 won the James Beard Award for Best Writing as well as Book of the Year, making him the first Black author so awarded. His piece on visiting Ghana and Bon Appetit was included in Best Food Writing 2019 and was nominated for another James Beard Award. Michael blogs at afroculinaria.com. Welcome also, Michael Twitty.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is my philosophy about moderating programs. I think it's important that you actually cover the topic as it's advertised. People have an expectation when they've taken the time, even on Zoom, and they show up and they expect us to cover what we've been promoting. So with that in mind, the title of this program is Culinary Justice, Exploring Cultural Resilience Through the History of Food. So 3 things stand out to me in that. One is the justice part. The other part is resilience, and of course, history, because this is the J Heritage Center, normally at the J Estate. We'll be holding these. So history weaves through all of it, and you guys are both historians. So we don't have to, we can go back and forth, but I want to make sure, I'm going to kind of go in order, and then, feel free though to weave that intersectionality as you see it. Let's start with defining cultural justice, culinary justice. The culinary part, I think we understand, but combining those 2 words, culinary and justice. In your own words, can you explain what that means to you? Michael, do you want to start since I started with Lavada?
Sure. Not that very long ago, probably about a decade ago, I began to read and learn more about food justice. And I did that through the work of my brother, Chef Bryant Terry, vegan chef from California, who's done a lot of work with food justice. Food justice and culinary justice are not the same thing. I coined the term culinary justice because food justice refers to the human right to decent, healthy, and sustainable food, to be able to eat. If you don't eat, you don't live. Culinary justice is a little bit more, had its own turn, and I'm going to allow Lavada to really expand on what it means in terms of the work that we do, but I'm going to give you the basic definition. Culinary justice refers to the idea that people, especially those who are marginalized and oppressed, have a right to the ownership and usage of their own culinary tradition. In other words, I remember the best way to really define it is I had a slight argument with someone who was a food justice activist. And they said to me that culinary justice seemed kind of elitist next to food justice. And I said, no. I said, if somebody jacks your recipe for rice and beans and all you got is that, and everybody loves your rice and beans, you need some culinary justice. The culinary and cultural productions in the kitchen are a product. They have a cachet. They have a value.
The value,
They're
yes.
a form of currency.
Mhm.
And to on the last note, to put it like this, if when you are marginalized and oppressed, your greatest currency is how you survive your oppression.
Mhm.
And for most communities that have had to scrape by and struggle, food has been a strong means of uplift, of survival, and let me put it like this: joy.
Yes. Yes. Please put it like that. It's beautiful. Lavada, do you want to
So
take it up some
I
more?
agree with Michael on both. And food justice is, people do need to eat. Culinary justice, I got this rush when he was talking about it, because one of the most ugly examples of that just happened recently in Bon Appetit. When the Haitian freedom soup was reduced to a butternut bisque. And it was done
Mm.
by a Black chef and a white publisher.
Mm-hmm.
A soup that defines the freedom of the only Black nation in this country,
Yes.
in our hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I really,
I know. I mean,
it wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't right.
Yeah. And
you can't step into history and pull a well-known recipe and do your spin on it. And that's what a lot of people want to do, because honestly, we repeat food, right? Everybody does a pound cake.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does, pumpkin pie.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some places you need to just leave alone.
Mm.
In historic preservation, one of the theories that's happening now is that, particularly as we're looking at preserving the spaces for African Americans and where African Americans have been. In a recent talk, and I'm sorry, I do not know the gentleman's name. I believe he was the head of the Ford Foundation. And he says sometimes the best thing you can do to preserve historic sites of significance to African Americans is to leave them alone.
Mm. Mm.
And some things you just need to leave alone.
Mm.
There are other things that you can grow on.
So that's tricky, right? For other people who are not African American. What do you think? I know, I mean, I spend way too much time on Twitter, but Michael's on Twitter, so I got to follow him. But this was huge, what was going on in the publishing end of this, right?
And I think, I'm sorry, Lori, the thing
go ahead.
that made it huge, right? To own a recipe, you have to change 2 ingredients.
Yeah, right. No, by law,
but to
right?
Strip
Yeah.
a soup of its ingredients down to its core that most people had made a couple of days ago on Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't do that. Even as historians, even as those culinary professionals that we are, whether you're doing modern or historic work, when we choose to take a classic recipe, like a chocolate chip cookie, everybody's got their own version of a chocolate chip cookie, right? Some of them now, to make them their own, they're putting so much sugar in them, it's not even funny, but they got to do something. But they're not stripping the dish of its essence.
Right.
They're not stripping the dish of its, literally everything but the base.
Right.
And the base wasn't right either.
The bottom line is that just like in real estate, the 3 words are location, location, location.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In this work, the one of many 3 words is context, context, context.
Right.
And I feel like Sister Lavada, I don't know if you're down with this, but the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of people, when they approach any aspect of Black African Atlantic culture, which is to say the Black cultures of North and South America, Europe, and westward facing Africa, I think people think that our stuff, I almost said something, our ish is simple.
Yeah.
And can be pared down to nothing. And if you just read a book and get an idea of it and a feeling, you somehow have the source code. And the bottom line is, nah,
No, you don't.
Own the source code. And I realize some people right now are mulling in their head, I guess I can't cook that if I'm not Black, if I'm not Haitian. That's really not the point.
Not what we're saying.
That's really not the point.
No.
Someone sent me some simple email a long time ago going, oh, thank you. Now, does this mean I can't use fire anymore? You go ahead, boo. You don't use fire. Don't have a home. Don't eat food. Go to the woods. Do what you got to do.
Right.
You want to be simple and smart with me about that? Because
Right.
the bottom line is that anyone can say inspired by and keep their good name.
Right.
But when people use power, platform, and privilege in a certain way,
Right.
this is and the context is missing and the respect is missing.
Right.
Then that's where we have cultural appropriation versus cultural diffusion. One happens in a healthy society. And the other one doesn't.
But the thing too, Lori, I have to say, sorry, we
No problem.
started on this one.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, it sets it up, right? I mean, that's the point.
But the thing is, it also discounts the fact that there were professionals that could have been asked.
Correct.
That
Right?
that was
If you
definitely
don't
part
know,
of it. Yep.
ask.
Yes.
Ask somebody who's Haitian.
Yes.
Go to
Yes.
Google.
Right.
I mean, it's not like we don't exist.
Right.
Amplify
And right.
their voices.
Yeah. Right. And it's
Amplify
not like
their
they're
voices.
right hard to find. There is this
Right.
thing called the internet. Right.
Right.
It's not like it's 20 years ago. The other word, and then I want to move on to something slightly different, a different angle of this. What I'm hearing in the middle of all this is commodification, right? I mean,
Mhm.
right. And which is even uglier in many ways. And because as you say, Michael, this is value. This is value. This is, as we often say, this is my job. Why are you asking me to do this stuff for free? Right. And it's the same thing. You're taking something that has value and you could be paying for it. So
Right, but it's
Yeah,
also
yeah.
about the fact that overall, I mean, and we're seeing the reflection of this, African Americans, people of African descent in this country are just devalued, and Haiti has been devalued.
Very much so.
You know,
yes.
our history is being devalued,
Yes.
and a lot of people just honestly don't know. So just
Right.
ask, be respectful and ask.
Exactly. So I have been reminded to, speaking of questions, to remind the audience that there is a thing called the Q&A. It's not a chat on this webinar. Down at the bottom of your screen, if you have questions at the end of this, we are going to have time for questions. So you can type them in as we go, and then we'll look at them when we're done our little discussion here. So that was our service break there. I also, the other thing I wanted to get a definition for, because our audience tonight, I suspect based on the people who have responded, is a global audience. It's not just Westchester. It's not even just America. And so that's why I'm laying all these things out so that people, we have a mutual understanding of what it is. Michael just went off screen, but
I'm
we're all.
I would have liked to have it mind on the screen, being able to make sure I put the computer.
No, it's fine. No, but you use this a lot. I'm sure Lavada does too, but I was thinking of in terms of your book. So this issue of food ways, right? Not just food or the way of making food, but this concept of food ways. Could you also define that too? Because that's become a very important part of this discussion.
Yeah, it's a folklore. It's a term from folklore. From the 70s. And that's particularly important because we think of some of these things as just passed on tradition, but the reality is as the pace of society sped up a lot and things started to change, there was a huge effort to sort of document things that were dying out. And they had to categorize and understand different material, social, and aesthetic cultural forms.
Yes.
So foodways initially was read as just material culture. In other words, how do you cook? Not just how you cook, how do you eat? How do you gather? How do you hunt?
Right.
How do you fish? How do you provision? How does food define your identity of your community or your personhood, or how it doesn't? How do they change? What's regional? And so, and also this trend we have of trying to define regions by what people eat.
Yes.
Starts in as well to sort of like, so people can have a framework. in the context of historic interpretation, which also finds its professional roots in the same time period. Foodways means, what is the food of the period that you are educating people about and studying? How does it's the system of
Right.
food, but
And it's
not the industrial system, but the cultural
Right.
system.
the cultural system of it. Right. I like
Yeah,
that.
and it also, it ties in to everything. It's from the archaeological dig going forward. You know, what are we finding when we dig a historic site, both in terms of the dishes, the bone scraps, what are we finding in the records? You know, when we go into historic documents, who are you feeding? Where are they getting their food? Are they poor? Are they middle class? Are they upper class? So it's everything that's related to the food. How is it consumed? I mean, it is from really, where did it come from? How is it grown in your area? Particularly in an area like New York, where we have multiple cultures happening in the same time. So there is no such thing when we look at a lot of the historic periods of things like American foodways. That doesn't exist. That's like a 20th century concept. So when we say historic foodways, then we can break it down to each individual culture. This is the way the Dutch did it. This is the way, I mean, like, for instance, everybody makes pea soup, right? But the styles of pea soup vary depending on who you are, depending on the social class you are, and a lot of things like that. So those are those particular foodways, everything that is related to it.
Well, right. And there was something that you said when we spoke a couple weeks ago about this, I think it all ties in. When you say how people ate in this time period that we're focused on, that your work is focused on, is this, that many people, amazingly, don't understand that there were enslaved people in New York, in the Northeast, right? And Michael talks about this in his book too, you know, the focus on the South, nothing to take away from that. It was obviously hugely important, but we're not, and so that, which begs the question, why don't people know, right? Where's the educational component? But also in terms of food, Lavada, you had a very specific take about that in terms of your work.
Well, they don't know because the educational system in America focuses on the British. Education connects enslavement to the South, which puts us in the Civil War period. New York is part of the mid-Atlantic or the middle colonies, and that's actually Dutch. So the Dutch are really devalued and downplayed. And it is also because the initial documents for this period are in Old Dutch, and people couldn't read them.
Yeah.
So it happened both here and in the Netherlands as well. And we were blessed with the presence of Dr. Charles Guring, who studied his language and was looking for a job and went to the state archives and said, so, you know of a job. 30 years later, 30 plus years later, we are now reaching critical mass on all of those documents, both here and again in the Netherlands. And it also is because at a period of time, apparently following World War II, the Dutch decided they wanted to be an egalitarian society, so they stopped teaching people about the period of enslavement. They just kind of disowned their own history.
Wow.
To make themselves look better. And a lot of people really did that because everyone downplays the Dutch, like they weren't really all of that involved and there weren't that many slaves here and blah, blah, blah. But you notice 1619, when they arrived in Virginia, whose boat did they get off of?
Dutch man of war.
There you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
The privateers and the pirates and the Dutch as world international merchant traders. But there's also the essence because in our area, we don't have quote unquote plantations. We have manors. And the manorial system is different from the plantation system. So where George Washington, for example, worked Mount Vernon as one unit, the resident population of labor are enslaved and they're working on one unit. You have his cohorts like the Phillips in Westchester, 52,000 acres, but they're not working that as one unit. They're breaking that into smaller farms and leasing that land to Northern European tenants. So you have hundreds enslaved on these 52,000 acres, but you got one over at this farm and you got two over at that farm and you got another 6 over here and the Phillips are holding 25. But when you put them all together, you have the hundreds, but they're not being held as one unit.
Right.
So
Right.
people really don't see the numbers.
Right.
And they're
Right.
being held by a lot of people who, in some cases, were illiterate. And so unless there's a census or an inventory or something, we're not, we're losing the count.
Right.
So we're crippled by that.
Right. And as we have said, there were enslaved people on the J estate.
Yes, well,
right.
New York was the largest, at one point, the largest slave market in the 13th colony. And for the rest of the time, it was
Wow.
number 2. Right?
Wow.
And
Wow.
what also happens is people say, well, the ships coming in that are officially logged aren't bringing that number up. But again, those privateers and those pirates, Phillips lost his place on the regional government, the provincial government, because he was dealing with pirates in the trade.
Right. Right. So let's weave it back to the food part of that then too. Michael, I was thinking of the French Briot Savarin, where he talks, you tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. Right. And so I'm thinking of this in terms of not just what we eat today, but what our foremothers and forefathers ate. And I know Lavada does this, you do this, you look at the food, the actual food, right? And how it's prepared, what it took to prepare it, who it was prepared for, how it was grown, all of those things tie in. Could you speak a little bit, Michael, to this notion of the food defining the person and their cultural existence?
Yeah, because I think one of the most important parts is that when you break down the very, very basic diet, the everyday diet, or even things that have come down to us, you often hear someone say, well, my people were white, we ate pig's feet. And I'm like, yes, class does play a role.
Yes.
In these things. And access plays a role. But that does not mean that just because one person has something similar of the same dish, that it has the same meaning. Meaning is the ingredient. So I'll give you an example. I'm also Jewish. Challah is an egg-based braided golden bread most of the time. You don't burn it.
Right.
And then there is, and it's associated with Shabbat, the Sabbath. Okay. But that is one version of what we call challah in Judaism, in Jewish culture, Jewish cuisine. And you can have the same kind of bread in Russian culture, but it's Easter bread.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that connection. So in other words, you have two peoples who live side by side in the Pale of Russia with very similar breads eaten at different times for different reasons. So I guess I always use that example to show people who are resisting the idea of Black cultural authenticity, validity, and uniqueness.
Yes.
Because to do so would mean they don't own us.
Yes.
Let that sink in, everybody.
Yeah, no, we are.
A lot of that stripping Black people of our context is residual enslavement. I'm so sorry. I know we have our own things. Like Lavada said, you can have a pea soup, I can have a pea soup. But what we put into it, when we eat it, why we eat it, who eats it, who prepares it, how we share it, is the cultural meaning. And that doesn't mean we don't Venn diagram. It just simply means that I need you to just be quiet and let me tell my version of the story. Don't get on top of me talking about we do this too. And I'm saying that because to put a framework around it, people will always ask both of us and our colleagues, well, that's cute, but what do you mean by Black? What makes it Black? Sweetie, it's not phenotype we're talking about. Yes. We're talking about ethnotype. We're talking about our unique part of our culture. Yes. The British had scones, have scones had, and Black folks, we have biscuits. Lavada and I grew up with good country biscuits, prepared in a certain way, eaten in a certain way, and the only proper way to eat a biscuit is to sop it.
Don't
fight with the sexes.
Well, it depends on the class of Sorry.
But and I didn't think about what that meant until I was in Ghana.
Right.
Yes.
And I noticed that the key means of eating food was with your right hand and taking the fufu or the whatever and going shh, shh,
Yep. Scoop.
and in.
Yep.
And then it was like, okay, there's a cultural timeline
Yep.
between that moment and our moment. Of course, the only way is not to eat it, just is sop it. Okay.
But see,
Lavada, you can counter that.
yeah.
To answer your question, there is a body of culinary knowledge that is unique to those of us who are the fractured remnants of the exiles of the African Atlantic, spread across many countries, many ways.
Yeah.
And it just speaks to very similar impulses that we have to deal with trying to survive our situation.
Right.
And this is the challenge I have in our area because of the difference of the way the enslaved were held.
Right.
We are still trying to figure that out, how it happened here. Because when you have one enslaved person in your household, or you have two enslaved people in your household, eating is expensive in period.
Mm-hmm.
And in the South, when you have 300 people on a plantation, you have ration records. They are a budget item, right?
Right.
You have one guy in your house, he's not a budget item once you paid for him. So it's where a lot of my work is now, because the enslaved are so prolific in culture, but so absent in documentation, because they're actually not cooking for themselves in most cases. We do have places like Phillipsburg Manor when there were 23 of them, or at Johnson Hall when there were 60 held at one time, but we don't have that volume. So what is the cultural context where there are, and I hate that I don't keep proper notes, because I just read in a European, I think it was, anyway, where a white woman was in New York and offended that she had to stay at a tenant farmer's house and the enslaved person ate at the table with them. That his black paw was in the same bowl as her white hand.
Oh, Lord.
So, but that's it.
Yeah.
What are they eating? Where are they staying? Where,
Right.
so that's the level of research that we're trying to do, because they're so spread out and they're not in high volume. So
Right.
a lot of times they're within the house, right? That one-on-oneness, that closeness of the enslaved here with their European owners is very different than it is in the South.
So
because of the nature of how they're held.
Right. And I'm going to add to that. There's a whole I call it the mosaic. The broken mosaic. Like there's lots, you can tell what the mosaic is depicting, but you don't have all the pieces.
Right.
And sometimes this is used against us as Black scholars in the field, because then you get told there ain't nothing there. As Lavada knows, there is something there. Right? We have to dig for it and leave no stone unturned, as Edna Lewis once said.
Yeah.
So, for example, let me give you a few pieces of the mosaic. And Lavada, chime in, because you know New York and the surrounding area much better than I do. But for example, there's a bigger direct connection to the Caribbean in the north.
Yes, that makes sense.
So they talk a lot about turtle feasts. Turtle feasts are kind of like the barbecue of the north, and they're always prepared by a Black cook. And literally dragging a big live sea turtle. Gary, I love sea turtles, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Off the ship to be butchered and made into turtle soup, to be roasted, all this stuff with punch. All of our, we talk about bartending and drinks and beverages, all that stuff, ain't no tiki bar, nothing. All this stuff from the Caribbean. And it has a long heritage. And shout out to Shannon Mustafa for writing the first book by a Black author on all the roots of these drinks since the 1800s.
We're at 6:36. I want to make sure that we cover everything too. And so I wanted to see if we could tie this particular piece, pivot a little bit to the notion of resilience, right? Which seems to me to also talk about present day, right? looking back at history, understanding history better, and what lessons we can draw from that to maintain our resilience in this moment. I mean, it may mean different things to you as well, but when I look at how bad the food system is, Lavada and I talked about this. We were supposed to just have a quick chat. I think we went on for 45 minutes. And as I said to you, I think yesterday, that cooking is a survival skill, right? And it's in short supply now in the wake of the industrial food so-called revolution, to me, which was a war.
See, I think cooking is less, how do I say this? The Industrial Revolution has less impact on the fact that people don't cook than the feminist movement.
Yep.
People don't cook because there has been a overall devaluation since about the 1950s, really,
Yes,
of
right.
different industries, positions in our country. And cooking is one of them.
Yes.
It has, and it's from two areas, right? As the industrial food complex went forward, it allowed African Americans who have been like the predominant cooks for like ever in this country to do something other than cook.
Yes.
So, and we also, in trying to move the race forward, we encouraged our children to get out of the culinary fields and to go into other education. I mean, if you read all of the work during, Du Bois or Booker T. Washington, or, name the list, it was all about moving the race forward. And to do that, we had to get out of the domestic skills. We had to get out of the farming. We had to get into education and move forward. So we cooked for survival for ourselves, but we were starting to step out of the kitchen. And in all honesty, in the white environment, most of the middle class and upper class households had Black cooks. So suddenly, during the feminist movement, it was also, they didn't, the white women didn't want to step into the kitchen and replace their Black help. So cooking overall has gone down.
Yeah.
And although we sometimes learn it in the household, if there's two things in it, if you have a mother that cooks and cooks well, there also, you got two choices. You either in there learning, or she's kicking you out of the kitchen because she doesn't want you in her way. So that has also pulled it down. So there are a lot of things that play into that. The industrial food allowed those who could afford it to eat out of the house, so they didn't have to learn to cook. But within the Black culture, it was also just trying to advance the race to get them out of cooking.
Yeah.
So on to piggyback onto that, a lot of these, when, both Pierre Freinet and Jacques Pepin, when they come to America, they notice there's a preponderance of Black cooks in those French kitchens. Never been to France, but they know how to cook French food. Some of them were apprenticed. Some of them were apprentice people who cooked before them. Oh my gosh, 12 Years a Slave, Lavada, author Solomon Northup.
That's right. Northup. Yeah, Solomon Northup. And
his wife was Anne, right?
I believe so.
She was a French trained cook, even though she couldn't read and write.
Yes.
There's a long tradition of that. And what happens is that we're doing Southern food, we're doing regional food, we're doing French food, we're doing British food, we're doing, early American food. We are the cooks of Delmonico's. But here's the thing. Those dishwasher to sous chef positions keep coming. Domestic sphere, Black women, restaurant kitchens, Black women, but a lot more Black men. And then, as Lavada said, civil rights comes up over a period of generations. It didn't happen overnight. It was really from 1910 to about 1970 something. And especially during the last period, it was like, I don't want you to go cook in some white person's kitchen or some house.
That's right.
No. And at the same point in time, you have to have a degree to go into a kitchen.
Right.
Now,
everybody becomes a chef.
Right. Not just a cook.
These white folks who have culinary degrees, who then now that it's a younger, fresher crowd. They get to play around. They get to do things in the kitchen and the business that the Black cooks never did. And then within what, 10 years, more television presence, and then you don't really see us. And then when we do go to culinary school, we're told, no, you don't want to do all that Jamaican, Haitian, Black American, West African, all that soul food stuff. Do the sushi, do the French food, do this to prove that you're different and better. Don't amplify your food. At the same time, Paula Deen out there amplifying our food.
Yeah, and you remember that conversation, Michael, we had at, we won't say the culinary school, where they were teaching this student to make a sweet potato pie.
The teachers did what?
They were making a sweet potato pie, but instead of boiling the sweet potatoes in the skins, remember they had them baking it?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, because it's a hot emulsion. So even when they teach traditional stuff, they're not even getting it right.
Right.
No, because you need to have that context there. And you also need to, we have a history of not respecting Black tradition bearers and not taking them seriously.
Right. Well, and then to segue there, but I do want to remind we have a Q&A. There's a lovely quote from your book, Michael, that ties into this resilience. No, it wasn't from your book. It was on your blog. It was a New Year's Day blog. And you talked about the Black eyed pea and its significance. And you said, and because it grows well in hot and drought conditions, right, where you require a lot of resilience, so that it had become a symbol of resilience, mercy, and kindness. I thought that was the most amazing thing.
I said that.
You said Michael Twitty, Africa Culinary 2012. Okay, it's still online. Look it up. Look it up. It was just so. It's the most beautiful thing I ever heard somebody say about a vegetable.
Because everywhere the Black eyed pea is, you have had enslaved Africans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Everywhere the Black eyed pea is, you have had enslaved Africans.
That's right.
It is here because it was a food on the slave ships.
That's right.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the so moving to vegetables a little bit and the growing of food a little bit. Because I want to talk. I think you all know. Does everybody know that the J Estate, we are planting the most amazing gardens. We've rehabilitated this whole space. It's the most beautiful thing, looking out over to the sound. And we're going to have these vegetable gardens. And I think we're completely open to any suggestions that you may have in terms of specific crops. We have some data that, not a lot, we have some data of what was grown there. But again, looking at it from a historical lens, through an historical lens, you know, something that's evocative, something that ties in appropriately or deliciously to this history. We would be completely open to any suggestions you two might make.
Okay, hold on. Excuse me. I got to give a shout out. Lavada Nahon showed me. I mean, to this day, I think I must have pilfered like I don't know how many copies of that garden map. Amazing. I mean, when I was first starting to like delve into the politics of heirloom vegetables, because I started out very ahistorical, interpretation oriented, and then I upped my game. And then I remember going to Phillipsburg Manor for the first time. I think it's when you invited me up there, and I remember looking at that garden, looking at that map, going, my dream is to have this garden in my backyard, because it was so beautiful. And then just the way that the map was in, with the way the story was told, to just get people to realize, Lori, that so many of the foods that we have are African, are native, or at the confluence of all these continents coming together, and the extraordinary nature of that. But the bottom line is, no, I've been a lot of places, seen a lot of gardens that celebrated the African American heritage. Nobody does it better than Lavada Nahon. I'm just saying.
Okay.
Thank you. It wasn't my garden.
All right, then Lavada.
My runaway place. But really, the challenge when we put gardens into historic spaces, and I'm really excited that the J is doing that, is what are you going to do with the food?
Come on.
What you grow really depends on what you're going to do with the food.
Yes, definitely.
If you had and that is about food justice, because one of the things that, we always want to put the empty tables in the low end households, but we know for sure now there are many wealthy families who are going to bed hungry too.
Yes, in Westchester.
What's happening in America right now.
Correct, right.
So you could do a lot of heirloom vegetables, but then this links back to the cooking.
The cooking thing all over, yeah.
Know how to cook it, but thank God for YouTube. There's nothing out there that you can't cook. And so because some things like cardoons that were very popular in period are now showing up in Westchester as lawn art. It's like, really? I wanted to like shove some things down. So I would say, as you're planning your garden, what are you going to do with food?
Right. And well, that actually is an integral part of Suzanne Clary and the rest of the board's vision for this. And it from moment one. So we're still working out how we can do it. There, believe it or not, I mean, there are health and safety issues apparently with when you donate food, right? So we have to, there's that to consider. I've been doing school gardens and community garden work for years now here. And in addition to the 40 different crops that I was growing. And, there's issues of fragility too. If you're going to transport them, there's, you have to worry about just food safety issues. Michael's a chef, he knows this too. And then there's the whole other piece. Lavada, tell this story if you like, of how there was that they were growing all these things and people brought the bags back.
So there was one of the river towns in Westchester had to put in a garden for the kids to grow, and they grew all this food, went home. The next day it all came back because wouldn't know, saying the parents didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to cook. They didn't know how to cook it. I went to a urban gardening conference at Weeksville Center, and it came up again over and over. People were there, but they don't know how to cook. And it is about asking people to teach you. It's not that complicated. People really think cooking is complicated, and it's not that complicated. But, you have to be willing to step out there, and you have to be willing to learn. But the wonderful thing about Westchester, and I will throw this out to you guys, several of the county parks actually grow food specifically for the food banks.
Right.
So
like
I would reach out to them to see how you tap into.
Are you thinking
they have apprentice programs and things?
Right.
And
it's a great idea.
It's there are two of them right together, and they're both county parks.
Right. Hilltop Hanover, right?
Yeah. And Hilltop Hanover actually grows food for the Westchester Food Bank.
It does. Yes. And I know.
So I would say tap into
great
them,
idea,
because that is a wonderful source that's right there, because we need the food.
Right. That's a great idea. Well, and then historically what they grew was, I'm looking at the list that Suzanne gave me. It's not that, it's not crazy like a cardoon, right, that you wouldn't normally see.
Cardoons are very good, actually.
Are they really? Now I want to try. I'll have to find a lawn in Westchester.
I'll show it to you.
Okay. Cauliflower, lettuce, potatoes, apples, of course, New York apples, pumpkins, melons, squash, right? These are not out of the
No, they're not. But one of the things you can do is, everyone is wanting to know what the indigenous were growing. Ganondagan State Historic Site has a huge garden. So if you're going to grow pumpkins that are native to the area. If you're going to grow corn, grow the right corn. Find the potatoes that were, they weren't doing what is an Irish potato? The Irish potato in the 19th century is not that big baking potato that falls apart that we use now.
Call the rumper, and you boil it.
Yeah,
small,
so find the correct variety. And that way you have both the visual that is period correct and food that is easy to cook. Right.
And even though the climate change issues are here, I mean, it is quite different, the climate now than it was in the 1800s. But I think that, again, this is something I've learned, the various, diseases and things that are affecting some of these crops. But I think that there's a way around it. And the seed companies, I mean, we're all working together to try to figure out what's the most resilient. There's that word again, right? Varieties, and doing breeding, not genetic modification, but actual traditional plant breeding.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go for it.
But if you look at the historic records for our area, they talk about when they lost all the apples because of blight, or they talk about rust hitting the wheat. They talk, about, kids, particularly enslaved kids, going out there and having to pick up all the bugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the weeds we throw away now, like purslane, is actually edible and was brought here along with dandelion.
Right.
So there's a lot that you can do.
Right.
Using your historic documents, using the historic base, and keeping it accurate to our area. No collard greens.
Nope.
Oh. Okay. Michael, you want to?
No.
He's not going to touch that one. No.
No.
It's true.
That's the way it goes.
Right. No, it's fine. We have our backyard farms. We can we can grow
But at a
elsewhere.
historic site, please put mustard and kale. Russian
Right.
kale was very popular.
Yes.
And so there are things that are there.
Turnips.
Yeah, with
Definitely.
the greens, please.
Yeah, with the greens. Right. No, I learned that. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions. Let's see. Okay, we'll start with some easy ones. Lavada, where can we find you on the internet?
LavadaNahon.com. Lavada Nahon on Facebook.
Okay, guys, there's that. Okay, and will the recording be available afterwards? I believe so. Okay, and Carol asked, how did the food of the enslaved in the North differ from those enslaved in the South?
Okay, so what Lavada said applies. You have smaller groups of people who are integrated into the cultures around them, Native and European.
Mm-hmm.
However, for example, if you're in the South, and that is defined by going across the Mason-Dixon from Pennsylvania into Maryland down to Georgia on one side.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, Florida and Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi and Louisiana were under the French, the Spanish, the British at various times.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot more food coming in from the continent and through the West Indies, not from, but through.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important because it wasn't the way the historians tried to put it. The Caribbean, this is Africa. These are Africans, not Afro-Caribbeans yet. In the North, lobster is slave food.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that. In the
Yep.
North, there are certain things that are attributed to the enslaved. For example, molasses, Caribbean molasses mixed with butter was called Negro butter.
Hmm.
So there were certain types of foods and styles of foods and class hierarchies of food that were associated with the enslaved. But there were also communities where people would, in cities like Boston or in New York or in Philadelphia, would actually, people would pool their money and buy ingredients that were unique to the community. For example, certain types of hot peppers, tamarind, certain types of spices, pimento, etc. Okay, somebody somewhere had some okra because there was okra around the urban areas of the North. So that was definitely there. The black-eyed peas were easy because they were brought on the ship, so you could just plant them at the time. But the difference is that these things were rather exotic, whereas in the American South, and even in places like Philadelphia, but especially in the American South, everybody's eating this because you have Black cooks who are defining the palates of everybody, just like the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like slavery did not work in terms of, first of all enslavement was colloquial and discretionary, depending upon where you were and where you lived. But one of the more important elements is to understand that the enslaved did something they had never done in the history of enslaved human beings on the planet, which is their music, their food, their attitudes towards religion and sexuality, their language, and everything else they had enslaved the culture of the enslaver.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing when you talk about the cooks in New York, because they're, for the most part, they're being forced to cook European food. And if you have one field hand in your house, he's not doing the cooking, right? So the woman of the house, whether she's Dutch, whether she's British, whether she's German, whether she's, or Palatine, or whether she's French, that person is eating what she's cooking or some variation of that, the scraps. Right. But when you get into the domestic sphere, particularly when you deal with New York and all the merchant traders, there's so much stuff coming in. All that Michael's talking about, the Dutch were trading that.
Right.
And the Dutch run New York even after the English, and it's the Dutch merchant traders, it's the Dutch farmers, it's the Dutch families that run New York well into the 19th century.
Right.
And it's the Dutch also who have a certain penchant for eating. They love to appropriate other people's food. The Dutch have soy.
They got all that spice in their food now.
Right. The
Yes,
spices,
right. No, that's true.
soy sauce on every table, the Indonesian spices, West African foodways are all incorporated into the Dutch way of eating by the time those Dutch show up in America. On top, one last little thing about this. We also have to remember something that look at this through the lens of Africans. Okay, you're eating cabbage. All right, I can get with that. Oh, you're eating dumplings. That's part of my culture too. I can get with that. Oh, you're eating a spicy soup. Okay, let me mess with that a little bit because I can understand that. Imagine what you would feel like if you were in exile and you had to look at things in the environment. Like Lavada talked about earlier, wild greens, certain wild foods. You're going to look for things that remind you of home.
Right.
And make it part of your repertoire.
Right. Beautifully. Yes. So a woman named Jen is asking, she says she's a New York City public high school literature and food studies teacher, and she is looking for recommendations on books. She wants to go on sabbatical and study culinary justice and its intersection with sustainability. Are there any reading suggestions you might have her start off with other than your own work, or in addition to your own work, where she could get going? Any other authors? Or sources? Long list,
Yeah,
right?
go to Amazon and find one that appeals to you.
Anything?
After this, what I think I ought to do,
Mm-hmm.
I ought to see if I can drum up a list of 10 or 15 books.
Yes.
But Jen, I'm only saying that because we all have Rona brain right now, and that's the thing. But
maybe.
I also want to make sure you have a blend of authors, gender balanced. Also, there are so many of. Okay, you know what? Let me just stop right now. I'll give you one recommendation that's necessary, and there's a book by my good friend Leah Penniman.
Oh yes.
New York. And what is the name of her book? See, I told you I had Rona brain.
Wait. Farming While Black. Wait.
Farming While Black.
Okay, hold on.
Start there. Look at her bibliography. Yes, that is an incredible.
That's it.
Yep.
Incredible.
It's backwards, but I think Farming While Black. This is Soulfire.
No, that's right.
It's amazing.
She knows what she's talking about. And then Monica, what is Monica's book about Black farmers? My grandfather's in the book. By the way, my grandfather, a blessed memory, Gonsley Twitty, was one of the founders of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And that is the organization that stopped the complete decimation of Black people from the land in the South. Because they were going to take all of our land for good, not pay us for what was taken from us and stolen from us. And the Federation successfully sued the United States government for actions taken against Black farmers over the past 20th century. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this.
There's a lot of, maybe Mike, I don't know, this is out of the kindness of your heart. If you're going to do this list though, would you post it on your blog?
Absolutely.
Or send it, that would be great.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that would be great. Irene asked a question about peanuts and how they were farmed and how, heavily that they used, and this is one of my areas of study is, soil degradation. And so she's asking the crops that were heavily laden with chemicals and how that affects the soil. But obviously, do you know anything about how that affected people's health in the South? And if you would
first things first is that the early South, and the reason why our history ended up the way that it did was because they wore out the land with monoculture. And then only after it's a complex blend of scientific farming, which was kind of English, German, and little French.
Yeah.
Then early American with what Africans had already always done. So let me give you a very quick example. These people would come through these plantations and go in the West Indies and the South and go, these people are filthy. They're horrifying. They have these mounds of food and dirt and leaves and stuff outside their little cabins. How gross is that? Okay, so you fast forward 21st century and let two little white kids living in a van do it, and you call it composting.
Yes.
Organic farming.
Right.
We were already local local, handmade, all them little words that people charge you an extra $25 for. We were already doing that back in the day.
Right.
Peanuts are a rotation crop. I saw
Yes.
that in Africa. When I was in Senegal and Gambia and Sierra Leone,
Mhm.
they were already, you already do that. And it,
Yes.
peanuts they grow with a peg. They're not the root. They grow off a peg into the soil.
Yep.
They're a nitrogen fixing crop like black-eyed peas.
Yes, exactly.
And
Yep.
if you go through the South, you will see that there's always three crops: soybeans, peanuts, cotton, over and over and over again, because where the cotton field was this year will be the soybean field next year, and then vice versa.
Right.
If I may, two things. One, if that woman who was asking about the book is in New York, the author of that book actually runs Soul Fire Farm in
Yes.
Poughkeepsie.
Mm-hmm.
So she's in New York.
Yes.
So I don't know if that person knows that. So
Yeah,
she can
Leah
actually
Penny.
look up Soul Fire Farm and go visit the farm. And the whole notion, like we didn't do peanuts here, but exhausting the land in New York was done with wheat. And it wasn't, after the Revolutionary War, the wheat crop kept failing. And that's why it went further up north towards Canada, into central New York and western New York, particularly once the Erie Canal opened. And all of that then became the wheat culture. So Hudson River Valley, that is now becoming chic for farming, over the years, that land was rested. So that's why it is now able to produce the level of food that it is, because for a while it was totally exhausted.
Yeah.
They brought in sheep and other things to do, because the where the monocrop had been cotton in the South, the monocrop here was wheat.
Right.
And like a lot of it,
Yes.
it went into the Caribbean and went into Europe, but a lot of people don't know that too.
Yes.
And one more thing about the peanuts. In New York and Philadelphia, you had the Haitians.
Yep.
Who were they call them refugees, but I don't really know what to call it when somebody's brought here because white people are terrified. But they
want to free them.
Right? They were big peanut eating and peanut candy people, and roasted peanuts and peanut candy were sold in the streets of Manhattan and Philadelphia by those Haitian immigrants. So we have these different layers of Black cultures in New York and other places, not just Africans brought over early times, but Caribbean folks and also African folks on whaling ships. All of that stuff matters. All that stuff is part of the mix.
Right.
When you talk about the Haitian immigrants, there was a woman who brought, I think it was 8 or 9 with her from Haiti when enslavement had ended here. And she wanted to move to the South. And there was a riot in Manhattan because they were like, no, these people are free. You can't take them out. You brought them in, you can't take them back out.
Right. One other question, and I think it's 7:04, so I don't know how much longer they're going to want us to speak, but I've done a lot of, right, I think they'll let us know. So I've done a lot of work in Westchester County with school gardens and things like that, as I said. And so Darlene is asking about, could you work with schools in Westchester County teaching culinary sciences to reinvigorate cooking of this type? And I have to say, Lavada, we've done all kinds of edible garden things, but it is rarely from an historical perspective. That sounds like a wonderful, well, you might, I know from your resume that you do stuff like that. How's it right here, right where we're at? How do we sign up for that?
Reintroduce home economics into the educational system.
Yeah, right. I know. Start that, please.
That would be really the best thing to do.
Yes, agreed.
Because one of the challenges when we start teaching cooking in the schools is insurance and knives and things like that.
Yeah.
So there are some legal ramifications to being able to do that.
Yes.
We can come in and we can do a food demonstration for you, but even at that, whoever does that for you has to be a, serve safe, licensed food professional.
Yes.
So there are reasons for that.
Yes.
But it is, even when I was teaching for Williams-Sonoma, it's the same thing, that there are legal ramifications for that. But one of the things that has, if we want to bring justice, if we want to elevate people, always, there's some basic classes that we just need to put back in the educational system, and home economics is one of them.
Yes, agreed.
You can call it life skills, you can call it whatever you want to do, but kids walk out of high school, they can't write a check, they can't, they don't know how to manage a budget. I mean, there's a lot that goes along with that. And there's just basic life skills.
Life
that
skills,
we are
yes.
missing
Yes.
as a country, and cooking is just one of them.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
No, agreed. Well, I think that's a great stopping point to speak of food and justice and culinary skills. And both of you, thank you so very much for spending this time with us. Kevin has popped back in. I think he's going to do the formal goodbyes, but
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Lavada and Michael and Lori,
Thank
for doing
you.
such an amazing job moderating it. I learned so much, and I hope you both will come and visit us in person when this nuttiness is over, or in the
Absolutely.
spring when we
Oh, for
open
sure.
the
Lovely.
gardens. We'd really appreciate it. And I will also, if you guys are okay with it, we recorded this. I'll post it on our website, and people can share it with others who didn't get a chance to join us tonight. And we can also, Michael, I can link to your reading list, to your blog, and so we can offer that resource to people too. Our website's also a great place. You can see all the programs that we have coming up in February, and you can also sign up if you want for our newsletter, which is a great way to find out what's going on. We don't spam you with it. We send one or two emails a month to keep you up to date. So thank you, all of you, again, for doing this. It was really a fascinating conversation, and we'll hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
guys.
much.
Good to see
Bye.
you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.